anyway, my partner and I drive to Santa Clarita. I drop them off at a restaurant. I continue to go to my interview. The woman says to me, "Can you answer phones?" Yes. You know how to make copies? Yes. Are you good with people? Absolutely. Do you have a California driver's license and a car? Yes. Can you start now? I must have gone white because who does that? This is my introduction to the industry, but that's how I learned that's how it is. Can you start now?
That was the voice of stage and production manager Sheree Greco, and it is my absolute delight to have her on as the guest of this episode of the Page and Stage Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Jason Cannon. Before diving into my conversation with Sheree, a brief Page and Stage plug. This podcast is only one part of my story coaching work. Go check out pageandstage.art. That's pageandstage.art. And there you'll find not just every previous episode of this podcast, but also the archive of my weekly newsletter, which is full of tips, tricks, inspiration, and encouragement for storytellers of all stripes. You can sign up for free and get the newsletter directly into your inbox every Friday, as well as every new podcast right into your inbox every other Monday. Everything is free. But if you find value in all my storytelling content, you can financially support me at pageandstage.art or forward any of the newsletters or podcasts to other story-loving friends, or hire me outright as your personal story coach. So if you're working on a memoir, play, or speech, I cannot wait to hear your story. Now, let me tell you a bit more about my awesome guest, Sheree Greco. Sheree is the production manager for the Ohio State University Department of Theater, Film, and Media Studies. She is responsible for overseeing and managing the theater design and production process, in addition to teaching and mentoring those involved in stage management. She has over 25 years of professional live event, theatrical, and television production experience. In addition to working for various regional theaters, including Goodspeed Musicals, San Diego Repertory Theater, Catco, and Short North Stage, Sheree spent 11 years in Los Angeles working in television productions on such shows as CSI, The West Wing, The OC, Entourage, How I Met Your Mother, and Modern Family. Sheree is a proud member of the Actors Equity Association, and if you ever get to gig in at the OSU, she will bring in some killer donuts. I speak from experience. Here we go with my conversation with Sheree Greco. All right, I am online here with the one and only Sheree Greco, who I had the great pleasure of meeting a couple weeks ago when I was up in Columbus, Ohio for a performance of Last Out. We stopped at the campus of Ohio State University. And Sheree, first of all, thank you so much for joining me today at the end of your long Tuesday. And second of all, I can only imagine it has been wildly insane in Columbus and on campus the last couple weeks since the Buckeyes took down my fightin' Irish.
Oh, yes. We were hoping that was going to happen, and it did. And because they lost to Michigan, and
right,
we didn't know what was going to happen. We thought it was over, and then it wasn't. And so, yeah, it's been pretty crazy.
Are any classes actually accomplishing anything right now?
Well, I guess mine is, but I don't know about anyone else.
Right. The true professional in the house.
Yes.
Great. So, Sheree, let's start with that. So you are on staff at Ohio State University in the theater department. What is your official title?
My official title is production manager and stage management advisor.
Cool. So for those who may not be familiar, and I had the great joy of being in academia for several years, so I get it. I was a production manager myself for a couple of years when I was on faculty. But for those who may not be in academia, who only know professional theater or don't know any of this, what does it mean on a college campus to be the production manager? And then it's not a faculty position, it's a staff position, but you are the stage management advisor. Talk me through kind of what your responsibilities are to the
Sure.
students then.
Sure. I think as production manager, it is kind of similar to professional theater in that I oversee the entire season of our main stage shows. So we do 4 shows a year, 2 each semester. And I create the budget for all the design areas, the shops. I create the master calendar, which includes performance dates, load in dates, specific rehearsal milestones that directors need to meet. So I kind of have a global view of the season,
Yeah.
essentially. In a way, I'm kind of a season producer as well. I hire, overhire. Sometimes I hire guest artists to come in and work with us. And
I'll
then,
send you my resume.
wait, well, today I need you. So, and then stage management advisor, that's the teaching part of my job.
Okay.
So I teach and mentor students, undergraduate students that want to stage manage a show. So they just go right into the driver's seat where, I guide them through the rehearsal process all the way through closing. So, I'm their safety net, their mentor, their advisor, everything.
Great. So that sounds like they're coming right out of high school into your program. There's classes in stage management, or also they run the show and you just kind of you mama bear hover over
Yeah,
like
yeah.
it's on the job training for them basically.
It's we call it a practicum or lab. Sometimes it's
Great.
called. I have a stage management like lecture style course, but that's only offered in the spring. So many students don't even take that before they actually stage manage. So it is kind of a wild ride because it's a BA program. So there isn't a stage management emphasis or track. So I'm
Right.
taking people from scratch and
Yeah.
just getting them to the point where they have the confidence to run the show.
Yeah. Okay. We've got a lot to talk about. How you even got to this position and your work history in television, but this is going to be fascinating because stage management is one of those things that like everyone knows, but no one actually understands just how many plates you're spinning, just how many cats you're herding,
Right.
herding HERD, not.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
so talk to me about, because stage management, yes, management, a lot of logistics, but there is an art to that mad science. Talk to me about how you present stage management to your students, especially if they're coming in kind of raw and cold like that. How do you train them up to take on such a huge amount of responsibility?
Well, it comes in steps and phases. The first part of it is just talking to them, getting to know what they think their strengths are, what they think their opportunities to grow. Why do they want to do this? Why do they want to take on all this responsibility? Do they understand, the level of accountability? So I have to kind of gauge where they are in this moment when they come to me. And then once I kind of figure out how I, need to navigate, the first thing I talk about are people skills. To me, the nuts and bolts of stage management, okay, I can teach you how to make paperwork and, character scene breakdown, blah, blah, blah. Okay, that's great. And it's amazing if someone's amazing at that. But what matters to me is, can you manage and lead a team of people? Can you have compassion and empathy even on the hardest days? So, I'm training them that way. I'm talking about, I guess, emotional intelligence in a way is really what it boils down to. And
100%.
it's a whole new concept for them. They're like, oh, I'm like, think about it as customer service, right? We have to give the best customer service every day. Like that's how we have to show up. And I think that really lands hard on them because they're like, wow. And I'm like, yeah, every day I need you to show up and just give the best customer service possible.
Yeah, it's one of those things where stage managers have to be so even keeled. I love that you said emotional intelligence because, like you said, the paperwork is easy. That's a task, right? The true work of the stage manager, it's almost like in baseball almost, like to make an athletic kind of parallel, the manager of a baseball team isn't on the field. It doesn't get, but it's managing those personalities. It's being, I love that you said empathetic, being aware of this actor is crunchy today. Ooh, the director had a late night. He's not very happy right now. Oh my goodness, the costume designer, right? And just keeping the room temperature such that everyone can do their work.
Right.
That takes so much awareness.
And it's hard for an undergraduate to grasp all that, right? I don't expect them to, get all the nuance. And there is a lot of nuance that you're just bringing up, right? I have to be in tune with the room.
Yeah.
And I have to know where is my director at today? Because maybe I need to, remind him of breaks in a different way. Maybe it's like I tell my students, like, you kind of need to flex. You need the ability to flex within the space and within the personalities, because you don't know what you're going to get day to day. And, just something that just came up recently. I had a student stage manager email me and say, one of my ASMs is just really bubbly and really social. And I am not. It's a bit much. So what I did is I just talked to the, assistant stage manager, and she's a freshman. And I said, so do you know how gregarious and social you are? And she's like, yes. And she's like, you're about to tell me to tone it down. And I said, yes, I am. And I said, why do you think that? I try to ask questions because I want them to understand I'm not just like, harping on them. And they said, the stage manager is more of a calm, I was like, yes, and you need to match that. So when you go into the rehearsal room, I want you to match your stage manager so that you're not a distraction, right? So it's little things like that. That's the hardest to teach, but that's what I focus on.
Yeah. And then even the skill of learning to anticipate what the director or the actors or the anticipating the needs. It reminds me of that great line in Gosford Park. I think Helen Mirren, I'm an excellent servant. I know what they need before they know what they need. It's just like
Yeah, absolutely. And, be ready for anything, I even talked to them about how to sit at the table. Don't slouch. Don't act like, you're not paying attention. Be engaged, because sometimes they're like, this is, we're just doing a table read. And it's like, no, you need to pay attention to the characters and storyline and plot. You need to know that too.
Yeah, they need to understand the story inside out. And also, if your energy is bored, that's contagious to the actors. They're going to be like, are we boring? Is this show boring?
Oh, yeah. And, I learned a lot of this at, the University of Cincinnati College Conservatory of Music. Shout out to my graduate school. They were really tough on stage managers. And so a lot of my teaching is kind of informed by some of that.
Mm-hmm. Do you talk to them about at some point, like I can speak for myself with the stage managers, that because a good stage manager is worth their weight in gold, man. When I was freelancing, I would force stage managers on the company whenever I was allowed to, because I'm like, no, this person, they get me.
Right.
They get it. They understand. And one of the big skills that I always valued in a stage manager was their conducting, their artistic sensibility of how to call the show, the timing of this light cue with that sound cue, that it's not always a precise 1-2 count, but you have to take into account how the actors are kind of grooving. There's jazz involved, improvisation. Is the audience laughing a little longer tonight? And for the stage manager to not just have their nose in the book, but to also be participatory in the storytelling, basically.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely what I focus on at tech. And sometimes I'll do it like during paper tech. And, I tell them like the first 30 minutes is like trying to get to the first scene.
Yeah.
It's the house to half, and then there's the curtain speech, and then we take the lights out, and then this happens, and then the actors hit the stage. And so I tell them, I'm like, if we have to do this 3 or 4 times, it's okay, because it sets the tone and we must get this right. So
Yeah.
once we get this right, then we move on to the next step. And so it is timing, because like sometimes they'll do the curtain speech, which is we do a recording, and then they'll just take the lights out immediately.
Right.
And we're like, well, let's people are still trying to find their seats and, whatever. So it is an art. And then I also tell them that they are the invisible character in every scene. So one of the examples that I give them, I always say, if I have an actress that's having an emotional moment and the lights are supposed to go down, right, at the end of that scene, I tell them, I'm like, sometimes I'm breathing with the actor and I'm trying to just be in tune with them, right? So, if she's supposed to be crying, I'm not going to cut the lights out, at the I'm gonna kind of, in a way, I kind of like hold the moment a little bit for them, and then we take the lights down, right? And then I'll talk to the actor afterwards and be like, "How did that feel? Was that like, did I like ruin that moment?" Or I have a dialogue with them because I want to, I want to work with them each night. So I
Yeah,
have to be
that's
in
so
tune. I have to be in tune, and you have to know acting. I mean, you have to love actors. If you're stage managing and you don't love actors, there's a problem. And I always say, I'm a big fan of people who are just so talented. I love watching over and over. I love watching The Discovery.
Ooh, yeah.
Watching that actor when they first started working with them, and then, especially in musicals, and they just get to that point, and you're like, wow, like I got to see the whole progression. And how cool is that? So many people don't get that. I get to watch it over and over again. I love it.
Yeah, and I to that point though, Sheree, I think there's a particular personality type or mindset that can invest in that, whereas there are other personality types or mindsets that might just get so tired of the repetition and not be able to tune in. I love that term, tune in to the tiny little micro adjustments, or because a lot of those discoveries that an actor will make, maybe in week one, week two, that's bigger discoveries because it's still pretty raw and new. But the
Mhm.
difference for an actor between performance 17 and 18 or 75 and 76 is going to be a much smaller permutation. But the stage manager still has to be so locked in and be able to recall what the actor did before and anticipate what they might do tomorrow. Man, it's just, yeah, it's a
And
good stage manager. Oh my goodness.
that's my favorite. That's my favorite. I just, I love calling shows. It's the ultimate.
Talk a little bit about, because I know every stage manager has their own particular, like, do you, let me back this up and ask, do you teach your stage managing students a particular like map key or nomenclature, or like, I know stage managers have ways they like to mark up their calling script. How to name their cues, how to mark the cues, colors, pencils, pens, stripes, lines, sticky notes. Do you have kind of your favorite best practice version of building a calling script?
Oh my gosh, I am so old school. I mean, we're just talking pencil and paper. And what's so funny is I belong to a couple of union Facebook pages. And every now and then there'll be like a younger stage manager that'll say, which do you like, iPad and you'll just see all these older stage managers that are like, pencil and paper. That's what we do. So because they're so green, I just stick to pencil and paper. I give them a straight edge because I do like straight lines coming from, and I always say carrot marks the spot, little carrot, little arrow or circle. And we do this in paper tech, go through the cue sheets with the designers, making sure, like, are we calling the lights with the sound on this one? Right. And eventually you get a rhythm, scene up, scene down, all that stuff. But we just do, standby lights 41 through 48 and sound A through D. So I teach them the standbys, and then the calling is, lights 41 go. They can write LX or LQ, whichever their preference is, doesn't bother me. Both are perfectly fine. So, yeah, I just try to keep it as simple as possible.
Do you have a shelf with all of your calling scripts from previous shows? Do you keep them?
I do keep the prompt. Yeah, I do keep the prompt books. Sometimes, they want to, if they're like a senior and they've done this a few times, then we kind of clean up that prompt book so they have something to show for,
Cool.
potential
Yeah.
interviews and stuff. And so I do get a little nitpicky, but again, it's student by student. because some students are taking it because they didn't get cast in a show and they need this credit to graduate. I mean, that's sometimes the student I'm working with. Other times I've got a student right now. They're going to be a career stage manager. That's what they want. So I do train everybody the same way in terms of I don't train for hobby, right? I train everyone as if you're going to go out and do this. But the difference is that like my current stage manager right now, we focus on, I'm like, what do you want to work on this show this time? What are the goals so I can help you with that? Whereas a one and done, I probably won't do that.
Yeah. So I just had to inject a little fun
Yeah.
detail because you were talking about how a stage manager needs to learn their director and needs to learn the cast in the room, and each time might be different. That you have to kind of adapt your methodology to what that particular team needs, and and also the way you approach a huge musical will be very different than how you approach a little 3-character chamber piece. But I'm remembering how, shout out to Roy, who was my stage manager for multiple shows, that he learned that I didn't respond effectively when he would give me 5s and 10s vocally. Like if we're coming up on a break, 5 minutes, Jason, and it would throw me off so much because often I'm in a deep dive place with the actors or whatever. And I'm usually very good about time and scheduling, but when I'm in rehearsal and we're going down that road, I lose complete track of time with the cast. I don't leave my phone on. I don't even look at my watch. I don't want to be distracted by the idea of time. And I rely on the stage manager to keep me on schedule, but their voice was so intrusive. And it's not Roy's fault, right? That's me. That's how I'm wired. He made little laminated 10 and 5 card, just wrote 5 and 10 and like decorated them with like tie-dye colors and laminated them. And he would just have the ASM very gently come over, just lay it on my table. No sound, just a little, and then it sits there too, right? And that ended up being the thing we did for years. So simple, but he had to learn that from watching me we had to figure each other out, right?
Right. And I had to do something very similar. I worked just for 2 weeks. I was subbing for a friend of mine, and I first table read and then 2 weeks of staging. So I was kind of, starting the whole process. And this director was in from New York. Now I didn't know him. He didn't know me. And I had to learn really, really quickly. And one of the things that I picked up on was he needed to call the breaks. He wanted to give that information to the actor. I don't have an ego about that. For me, whatever works in the room, okay? Like if that's what you need,
Right.
by all means, have at it, right? So what I would do is once I figured out that, because he would look at me and say, "Are we coming up on a 5?" And I would say yes, and be like, "Okay, everyone, let's take 5." Whatever. You're posturing and stuff. So at the beginning of every rehearsal, I already know where the breaks fall. I mean, if you're doing 55 or 80, you know where they fall already.
Yep.
So I just would write, here's when this break happens, and here's when this break happens. And I put the post-it on his table. He thought that was the greatest thing ever. And the two of us, then all of a sudden I was in, right? I'm in, right? I've given him what he needed. He didn't have to ask. And so he could look at his post and say, "Okay, everyone, I think we're coming up on a 10." Okay.
Now you made him look magical. You made him look all-knowing.
To me, it's like, okay, I'm not going to fight a battle like that. Right. I
Well,
mean,
of course.
it's not worth it. So whatever I can do to make that, I want to have a good relationship, right? I want to learn what they want.
Yeah. Sheree, how did you first get into stage management? Like, what is your stage management origin story?
Oh my gosh, you're going to. So in high school, I was at typical high school drama club. I got cast in musicals because I was always cast as the mature roles. Okay. I was heavier than the other girls. I wasn't an ingenue. So I was like, Mother Abbess and Sound of Music and, the old hag and Showboat and whatever. So I was getting cast a lot. So I'm like, I'm going to be an actor. That's what I'm going to do. My mom was like, great. So I auditioned for Otterbein University here in Westerville, Ohio. And I'll never forget it. First, you auditioned and then you had an interview with the chair. So I had an interview with the chair, and he was such a kind man. And he said, Sheree, he goes, I really like you, but I can't let you into the BFA. Compared to a lot of other students, you're not making the grade. However, if you think you could go into education at some point, I will let you into the BA program. Well, of course, I was like, okay, great, let's do let's do the BA program. So I get in, and I get my professional headshots made, and I'm auditioning up against BFA students, and I mean I'm terrible. I mean, to be quite honest, I'm terrible. Like, these other students are just blowing me away, and so I always tell this story. I had an advisor. This was back in the day where we had to meet with advisors and they had to sign off on your schedule, which they don't have to do anymore. But I had an advisor and he said, how's this acting thing working for you? No one had ever asked me. No one asked me how I felt or thought about it. And I said, you know what? It sucks. I don't like it, but I don't know what else to do. Like, I'm here and I don't know. And he's like, what about stage management? And I said, I don't even know what that is. And so I, became an ASM on a show. I think it was King Lear. I think that's the first show I ASM'd. And I just took to it. I loved it because I'm an organized person and I like to make order of things. I just loved it. And then I just kept doing it.
All right, Sheree, when we just left you, your advisor had set you on this new glorious yellow brick road of a path of stage management, and you take to it, and you master it, and you get through college, and then you end up in LA somehow, and you spend several years in the television industry. And what is the origin story of Sheree? What was your job? And because I mean, in the intro, you all heard how many well-known shows Sheree worked on. So how did you get from Otterbein doing stage management into LA working on these huge television shows?
So this is a great campfire story. And I love to tell it because, people are like, you did that? So, I stage managed in graduate school. Then I did an intense internship at Goodspeed Musicals. And then I moved out to the West Coast with my then partner at the time. We just wanted to go to California, to be quite honest. She got a job as the resident house manager at La Jolla Playhouse.
Whoa.
I was jobless. So we get to San Diego and I'm burned out from stage managing at this point. I'm just, kind of a little bit lost. It's just, I'd just been doing it and doing it and doing it and doing it. And I just didn't even want to get back into it. I was taking a break, but I needed a job, right? I need to find work. I need to figure out what I'm going to do with my life at that point. I had a former professor from CCM who was living in LA and he became an Imagineer for Disney.
Oh, wow.
He's a sound designer. Actually, shout out to Michael Hooker, because if it wasn't for Michael Hooker, I would not have done television. But he said, why don't you try television? And I said, well, how am I going to do that? I live in San Diego. He said, well, you'll just use my address. Just put my address on your cover letter and your resume. And if something happens, then you can just, hang out in my guest room until you find a place. Now, I was probably 25 or 26 at that moment. 50-year-old Sheree would not be doing this, but 26-year-old Sheree is like, okay. so I would go to the library. Do you remember the library, right? So it's 1999, early 2000. We have the internet, but we don't have lots of websites and stuff, right? It's still in its infancy. I don't even think I was on email regularly. So I would go to the library and I would pick up the Hollywood Reporter. And he told me, he's like, get the Hollywood Reporter and go to the back of the magazine. And there you will find shows that are in pre-production, production, and then post-production. And it would list like a title of the movie, or it might say Clint Eastwood film or Clint Eastwood project. and it would give the studio, Warner Brothers. And so I would look for anything recognizable if I knew the director or if I was familiar with the actor or the studio. So I always just chose the big ones. If I didn't recognize anything, I'd be like, nope, not doing that. And we had a janky old fax machine. And I would do cover letters and resumes and just fax, fax, fax. And for the longest time, I didn't hear anything, but I never gave up. I never gave up. And every week, go to the library, get more information. So I went to some interviews. My partner and I would drive to San Diego, which is like a 2+ hour drive in the traffic, right? We didn't have AC in the car, so I didn't wear interview clothes in the car. Then we'd have to find a Starbucks so I could change my clothes and then go to the studio. So
Oh my gosh.
it was a thing, right? And we did this a few times. I think I interviewed for like a Bette Midler pilot and a Gina Davis pilot, and I didn't get him. So one day I get a call from a woman, and she said, I'm looking for a PA, production assistant. I got your resume. It's a show for CBS. She didn't tell me the name. And we are located in Santa Clarita. Well, Santa Clarita is kind of out in the middle of nowhere. It's kind of deserty, I think just north of Los Angeles, kind of in the mountains. She said, it's not a traditional studio. I'll give you the address. She's like, it's an old Lockheed compound, like the South Bomber Lockheed compound.
Oh.
So yeah, they had taken over some office building there on the compound, which was huge. And then they converted 2 warehouses into sound stages.
Okay.
Anyway, my partner and I drive to Santa Clarita. I drop them off at a restaurant. I continue to go to my interview. The woman says to me, can you answer phones? Yes. You know how to make copies? Yes. Are you good with people? Absolutely. Do you have a California driver's license and a car? Yes. Can you start now? I must have gone white because who does that? This is my introduction to the industry, but that's how I learned that's how it is. Can you start now? And they don't know I live in San Diego. So I'm like, oh, so I don't answer because I don't know what to say. And she's like, tomorrow at 8 a.m. And I know that the tone of her voice, if I don't say yes, I don't get the job. So I say yes. Well, great. I get in the car and I'm driving back to the restaurant to pick up my partner. And I'm practically in tears because I don't know how to do this. What are we going to do? I got to be here at 8 a.m. tomorrow. When I walked into the restaurant, she's like, oh, you didn't get the job? I'm like, no, I did get the job. And, she was great. She's like, we're going to figure this out. We're going to drive back to San Diego, pack you a suitcase, drive you back to LA. You'll stay with Michael and I will figure out the rest. You just need to do this job. So yeah, I had a very, very supportive partner. So I show up, right, at 8 a.m. and I call my mom, I'm like, Mom, I'm starting my first TV job. I was so excited. And she's like, what is it? And I said, oh, it's a show on CBS. CSI, Crime Scene Investigation.
What?
It hasn't aired yet. And she was like, oh, okay, well, I'll look for it. So when I got there, they had 2 episodes in the can and they started episode 3. And I'll never forget, I knew I knew of Mark Hellenberger and I knew of William Peterson. And so I was excited about that. But I have to say, the day that it aired, we were all in the cafeteria for lunch, and the creator and writing team and producing team wheeled in a big TV and they said, congratulations, everyone. We're airing tonight, but we're going to show you the episode now. And did you watch that show?
Yes, it's been a couple years since I saw that episode, so I'm not recalling just how exactly it started, but yeah.
And the title sequence with the Who and, who are you?
Yes.
And I'm watching the whole title sequence and I just say to myself, I'm on a hit show. This is going to be a hit. I just know it. And when we aired, we were number 2. By the second week, I think we were number 1. And then we were number 1, like for a really, really
For a
long time. Like,
while.
nobody
Yeah.
could touch us because no one had seen a forensic procedural show like that.
Yeah.
It wasn't Law and Order and it wasn't NYPD Blue. It was just something completely new. So that was a thrilling feeling. And that's how I got started.
Man. So how does the sausage get made? So you have a backstage, so you're a PA, like, so what was if there was a typical day, what was kind of your typical day like being part of the mechanism of creating CSI?
PAs, like, they're the workhorses. I mean, my day was waiting for the script to come out or waiting for pages to come out and then getting in my car with a list of where I need to go to deliver these scripts or pages to the guest actors. Or if we didn't have certain actors on set that day, I have to drive to their houses. I don't know how they do it now. I would imagine it's probably more digital, maybe.
Yeah.
Although I think they probably still print out scripts and all of that. You got to have it in your hand. But LA traffic, I could easily spend 4, 5 hours of my 12-hour day in the car. Easily. And so it was a lot of that. And getting craft service for the writers room, going shopping. Here's a credit card. Go, here are all the items that the writers like. Okay, great. And go to like a big Costco and get all that. So a lot of errand running, answering phones. It wasn't You didn't get on set. I learned that an office PA doesn't really get on set much. So whenever I did get on set, I would make friends with the assistant directors. And they liked me and they knew that, I'm smart. I've got a theatrical background, so I understand the production process in general. And so whenever they would have like a big day where they had like a lot of extras, they would ask my boss, they would say, "Can we have Sheree on set as an extra set PA today?" And I would. And I'd run base camp, like where all the actors' trailers are.
Yeah.
So, I tried to get on set as much as I could.
Man, did you, of course, without it, going into Slanderland, did you get to like ever interact with any of the stars of the shows you were on? Dude, like, how do those cast members treat PAs? Like, is it a one big happy family? Is it like in theater where everyone kind of knows what everyone is doing for each other, or is there kind of different bubbles?
I felt like it was different bubbles on the shows that I worked on. And maybe some of it was I like I kept I didn't, I was starstruck, right? I mean, sometimes you're, but I always kept it cool. And so I kept my distance. It wasn't so much they were keeping their distance from me. I was doing it because I didn't want them to think that I'm trying to hang out with them. I'll
Right.
never forget though, I did feel invisible to them. I did. But if I was running base camp, I was the one that would go to the trailer and say, Billy, we're leaving in 5 minutes to go up to location or whatever. That was me. That was, what I would do all day. One day it was raining. It was pouring down rain. I mean, so hard. And I'm at base camp and I've got a raincoat that costumes loaned me and I've got an umbrella and it's just, I'm soaked. It's just coming down. And you didn't have anywhere to hang out for PAs at base camp. And Marg Hellenberger came up to me and she said, first time she said my name, she's like, Sheree, she goes, go into my trailer. And I said, and I was like, oh, no, I'll get in trouble. Cause like, I'm just like the line producer would be like, what are you doing? And she goes, no. She's like, don't worry about it. Go sit in my trailer. You're not going to be out in the rain. So, I went in her big fancy trailer and hung out. And, you had those moments sometimes.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget her kindness because she didn't have to do that.
Yeah.
She really didn't.
Yeah. So CSI is your first big hit job.
First show,
Uh,
I did it for 2 years. What I learned is sometimes you don't get asked back for various reasons. I happened to have a clash with the production coordinator in the second year of
mm,
the show. And so I knew I wasn't going to get asked back. But and then you go on unemployment for the summer because the shows go on hiatus. So I learned that whole cycle of like, ugh, every summer, right? Unless you're one of the crew people that are making big money, you got to figure out what you're going to do. So I would just sign up for unemployment. So I'm trying to find a project, and I remember Fox Network kept advertising for this new show called The OC. And it was like the new 90210.
right.
I was a big 90210 fan because that was my generation. So I told my partner, I was like, I was like, let's watch the show because the advertising I'm seeing for it looks pretty cool. So we're sitting down watching the show, and the title sequence comes on, and I'm like, I said, this is going to be awesome. And it was done really well. And I'm like, this is going to be a hit for that age group. So faxed the resume, figured out where the production office was. They were in Manhattan Beach. We were living in Burbank. It's like a 45-minute drive. And I didn't think I was actually going to hear back from them. And I kid you not, 3 days later, I get a call and they say, "We got your resume and we're looking for a production secretary." I drove out there and they hired me on the spot and I started the next day. And so I tried to craft my resume so that I only have hit shows on there. I mean, no offense, but I wasn't going to do some kid show on Nickelodeon. Like that's not what I was going to do. I
Right.
wanted to have the big heavies on my resume. And that has opened doors for me. I mean, one of the reasons I have my job now is because people love the fact that I worked on all these shows.
All right, Sheree, you just mentioned that having all these big, heavy hit shows on your resume were part of how you got your current position. And to just kind of bring full context, you're from Ohio, right? So this was kind of a bit of a homecoming for you to come back to Columbus.
Yes, I'm
But
originally from Cincinnati, but just gravitated toward Columbus.
yeah, so did you just kind of have a natural end to your career in LA? Were you missing theater and stage management? Was it what kind of ended your time in LA and brought you to the theater department at OSU?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I think your priorities change as you get older.
Oh yeah.
And, I'm out there and I think I'm like 35 and I'm working at 20th Century Fox Studios. I'm an executive assistant to a senior vice president of comedy. And, it's great, but I'm not moving. I'm not moving upward. And to be honest, again, I was just kind of getting bored and burned out. And we wanted to move back to Ohio to be closer to family. So that was just the important thing for us at that time. So we moved to Columbus and I didn't have a job for like a year, but I started to come to the realization that I'm ready to teach. I'm ready now to take that BA and that MFA, and I think I have something to share. I think I'm feeling like I've got knowledge and I want to help students get to where I am.
Mm-hmm.
So Otterbein was looking for production manager and they turned me down twice. So
What?
I'd like to tell myself that it's just because they knew they couldn't afford me. That's what I tell them.
There it is. There it is.
So I interviewed twice. They went through their production managers and then Ohio State. And I was like, okay, this has got to be for me. This has got to be made for me. And I interviewed and, met with many faculty and staff. And it was a whole day talking to people.
Oh yeah. The gauntlet.
It was the gauntlet. And the TV stuff on my resume, it's shiny, right?
Yeah.
I mean, how many people in, Columbus have that resume. I'm going to venture to say not many.
Yeah.
And so it does it opens up conversation. People want to know about it, and folks think that it's good for students to have access to that knowledge.
Totally.
Especially now, more than ever, everybody wants to try and get in TV. At least that's my experience with the students, that I work with. So I went through the gauntlet, and I just knew I was going to get it. I knew I had a really great time with everyone, and I did. And I can now say, and I tell my students this, like, I didn't know this was my dream job until I got it. And it is my dream job. Like, I am going to retire from the Ohio State University Department of Theater, Film, and Media Arts. This is it. So I feel like I've made it.
Oh, yeah.
And I got the job right as I was turning 40.
Man, that's great. Jackpot.
Right? Yeah.
All right. So you're talking about having things to offer to the students. And as I was kind of preparing, I found an online, a quick little feature interview with you. And there's something you said that I want you to unpack a bit and dig into there.
Okay.
That when you talk to students, as you mentioned, some of them are terrified. They're young. They're just fresh out of high school. They don't want to mess up. And you will often say to them that the failures, the mistakes are where the learning is, that to you, the best moments are when you mess up. And so, especially through the prism of talking with your stage management students, talk about that. Talk about why those are your favorite moments.
Well, I think because I'm kind of like, I don't know, a Monday night quarterback sometimes. I'm in the rehearsal room. I have to see what they're doing, and I can't be with them every single moment. I've got
Right.
2 shows going on at the same time. So I'm kind of in and out, and I'll see what they're doing, and what I tell them is like, I'm just going to course correct you. I don't want you to take this personally. I want you to take this as like, I'm taking the best parts of you and I'm just tweaking. That's all we're doing. And when I tell them up front, like, look, I'm tough but fair. Trust me, just take my feedback and implement it, and you're going to be fine. So I'll give them feedback in the moment. I don't wait till later. If I see something, like if they maybe talk out of turn in rehearsal, sometimes they forget that they're not actors. They're not the director, right? The director didn't ask you for your opinion about the staging right now. I'll say, like, you want to refrain from that, right? So wait till you're asked, right? But you're learning, no big deal. So to me, that is where the learning is. If we were perfect and we're not learning very much, because, right? To me, when I make a mistake, that's where I learn. And I try to tell them, I'm your safety net. There is no failure here. The show will open. You will run the show.
Right.
Right? The train's left the station, and you're going to have hard days, and you're going to have days where you're like, wow, I really rocked rehearsal. And I'm like, hold on to those moments and learn to pat yourself on the back, because no one's applauding you at the
Right.
end of rehearsal, right? So you have to learn how to, love yourself and take good care of yourself, and just, keep telling yourself, like, I'm doing good work. I really, really just try to focus on emotional intelligence, Jason. I mean, it's just yeah, they have to have it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a tough job.
Yes. It can often feel thankless.
Yeah, it can. I used to feel, but I don't. As I've matured and as I've grown, like, I know I am valued. Believe me, I know. There's no question about that. So I know, like, I'm doing good work. Otherwise, I'll hear about it.
Right.
So, yeah, I guess that's what I kind of mean is when I'm course correcting them, that's where the growth happens. That's where the learning happens. And they learn, what's important is they learn how to take feedback.
Yes.
Learn how to take can you take feedback? I've seen that on so many interview questionnaires. are you able to take feedback? Well, my students are. They're able to take feedback, and they actually like the directness. Sometimes they get vagueness or coddling in other classes.
Mm-hmm.
Hope no one's listening. Sorry, folks. Um, sorry, colleagues. But they've told me many times, like, we really appreciate you saying, don't do that, do this.
Yeah, that bit of clarity, that bit of, yeah, what is it Brene Brown says, clear as kind.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. It's like I'm not going to be ambiguous with them. There's no mind games here. I'm not going to ask you like, now what do you think you did wrong? They don't know.
Right.
I'm there to I'm there to tell them. So, yeah.
Oh, that's great. Before we wrap, I want to put you on the spot real quick, because every stage manager has like those 3 or 4 like bizarro world moments that happen where you had to kind of jump in and save the show. I'll share one of in college. My roommate Nathaniel was basically directing and starring in Greater Tuna with one of his buddies. And for those of you who don't know Greater Tuna, one of the gimmicks is that there's an invisible PA, basically a radio, because there's 2 guys on a radio show in a small town. They play all these characters, and this nameless, faceless hand will just stick out and like flap news updates to them. So I had kind of co-directed, had been the outside eye for Nathaniel, and during one of the performances, all of a sudden I noticed that they have jumped ahead like 2 pages in the script. There's so many different sketches and vignettes that they just leapt it. And then I saw them both realize they had leapt it. And then they hit a spot, and then I saw them jump back to try to pick up the 2 pages they missed, not realizing that they were going to dead end themselves into the stuff they had already jumped to. I see them both starting to panic as they realize they have no escape plan from what they thought was their recovery plan. So
Right.
I sneak down, I go back, I write down a cue line on a piece of paper to jump them over the part they've already done to get them back on track. And I'm backstage just waiting. And as soon as they kind of hit that wall, I flap my hand out there, right? Complete. It's not scripted, but I just it's part of the show. So it's not like I'm making this up. So I flap the paper. I see them both kind of, and Nathaniel turns and grabs it and reads it. They jump ahead. I'm sitting backstage, as only a college kid can, thinking I've saved the universe. I'm panting backstage. I did save the show. Nathaniel finishes. He comes off for a quick change. He just looks at me and goes, "Thank you." Live theater.
Live.
So I say that as a fun story, but also to set you up, Sheree. Like, is there a moment or two in your stage management career where you had to like leap into the breach and save the show?
I don't know that I had to leap into the breach, but I had things go wrong that
Mhm.
no one could teach me, right? So,
Right.
I'm at Otterbein and we're doing Phantom, not Phantom of the Opera, but the first musical,
Right.
the one that didn't get
Didn't become the worldwide phenomenon.
But I always thought I actually thought it was a better story. I liked this musical. Anyway, it's at Otterbein. It is a big technical show. We've got pyrotechnics and all this stuff. And I can't remember if it was top of show or during intermission. It might have been during intermission, but the transformer blew outside of the theater. And
Oh.
all the lights went out, and then the emergency lights came on. And I'm like, okay. So I get on the God mic and I'm like, hi. I'm awkward. I'm like, hi, ladies and gentlemen, please stay in your seats. It appears we have lost electricity. Uh, I'm just like vamping and I'm just like, okay. And I don't even know what has happened at this point. I'm in the booth. So, I run down and go backstage and talk to the crew. And they're like, yeah, transformer blew. And then I've got to like call, a faculty member and like, I can't remember like how it worked out, but eventually the lights came back on and we were able to do the show. But that was, no one teaches you that.
Right.
Right. Those are
Not in the curriculum.
yeah, like it's not in the handbook, although it's in my handbook. I have like, little speeches, written out for them.
Oh, right,
that
of
that
course.
they have in the booth just in case that's something we talk about. But
It's
yeah,
like a telemarketer script.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, here's your announcement book. So that was one. I've definitely had actors like skip dialogue where I had cues and I would just say, go to the next, go to the next. Okay. What? Okay. Am I in Q 56? Okay. Thank you. That's happened so many times. And now I'm not phased. I just tell my console operators where I need them to be and then we just go from there. But,
Yeah, 'cause it's kinda like it's live theater, right? So it's almost like you have to sort of expect it's not gonna be the same every night at
yeah.
all.
I mean, when it happens, you're like, ugh,
Yeah.
screwing up my work, you know?
Yes.
It's like that's the first feeling is like, I can't believe this. Okay, go to like Q 56.
Right.
No.
We're gonna have a talking to later.
Yeah. No, I'm gonna give you a note about that. So it's more I feel like I'm inconvenienced. S
Right. Yes, of course,
you
of
know,
course.
but yeah, I've actually kinda lucked out. I haven't really had to, like, jump in and save the show,
But you could.
but I think I could. I do think I could. Yeah, absolutely.
Uh, Cherie, this has been so much fun. Again, part of the reason I have so much fun, traveling with Last Out is that I get to meet teams and people all over the place, and it's just so invigorating to, like, geek out and talk shop. So I wanna wrap with a couple pieces of advice and a spotlight for you.
Yeah.
The first advice is, what is the best advice that you have ever taken?
Oh my gosh. I should have read your email so that I could have prepared for this.
No, I can edit this part out. I can just edit out your thinking.
Yeah, you probably should. Let me think on it. Like, I know that I've been given good advice. Okay, this is gonna sound, like, really, like, very, very specific. It's not broad advice, but it's specific advice to stage management. At CCM, it was an intense program when I was there, and we had a very difficult director who was the chair of musical theater, and when the chair of musical theater at CCM is a big deal. And he was a big personality, for better or for worse. He was a screamer. Unfortunately, he was a yeller, very intimidating. And he felt that it was his job to train the stage managers. Yeah. However, I learned some big lessons from him. One of them was be ready at the table, be ready to jump in. We were doing Oklahoma and we were doing a run through, and the peddler, carpetbagger, was trying to open a suitcase and he opens it up. It faces down stage. He opens it up and he can't get it open. And the whole stage management team, we're just sitting there and he can't get it open. He can't get it open. And finally, the director like says, "Is anyone going to get up out of their chair and help this actor?" So, and of course, I'm thinking to myself, like, yeah, like, what the hell are we doing? So I get up out of my chair, run, and I'm like, helping the actor. We get it open, and then now we can move forward with the run through, right? Because we're like waiting for this suitcase to open. So, one of the things I tell my students is like, don't let actors struggle. Like, if there's
Mm,
something happening in the room, don't just sit there at the table and like watch them try to get something open or just go up there really quickly. It's okay. The director's not going to get distracted. That what they're getting distracted by is the fact that the actor can't open the suitcase,
yeah,
not the fact that you're jumping away from the table. And so students tend to they want to stay behind the table. They don't they don't want to like go out there and fix something. So
yeah,
that was good advice. Like,
yeah,
be ready, and don't be afraid to jump up and actually help and get the show back on track in the room.
yeah. That's part of that emotional intelligence. Just understanding your part of your job is removing obstacles from the other artists in the room with you who have a different job than you to do.
Right. Or like being ready to do a scene change in the rehearsal room.
Oh yeah.
It's students don't like, well, we got to get up from our table. Like
It's so safe
like,
here.
they're
I'm so
singing,
safe.
singing a song. And you're like, yeah, but you've got to do the scene change for the next number. So you want to be invisible, but you can't. And so I guess that was like great advice.
That is. All right, flip it. What is the worst advice that you have ever given?
Oh, that I've given to somebody?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Have I given bad advice? Oh my God. Oh man. Um, Not that I'm perfect or anything, Jason, but it's hard for me to think of bad advice that I gave somebody. I think sometimes a student stage manager, obviously they're going to know the show better than I am. While I'm the production manager, I'm overseeing, multiple shows, and I'm not sitting with the script,
Mm,
all the time. So I don't know if this is like bad advice, but sometimes I'll like interject and they'll say, "No, no, 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 no. It happens here." And then
yes,
and I'll be like,
absolutely.
and I'll say like, "Okay." Or I'm in the room with them, I'm like, "Don't you need to do this?" And they're like, "No, it doesn't happen until later." You know, and I'm like, I just feel like so stupid because I'm like, and then I'll say, "I'll stop. I'll just stop there." You clearly know the script better than I do. I'll just stay out of your way. So I guess in a way, like that's bad advice I've given is when I meddle, and they're like, no, Sheree, that's not what we're doing.
I pretend to know all.
Yeah,
That's
like
great.
like usually, I'll come to a few rehearsals in the beginning and then I'll go to the designer run through. And the designer run through is when I'll say, is that seems like that's gonna like be an issue. And they're like, no, we've already fixed that. I'm like, oh, okay.
Awesome. You've trained them to the point they no longer need you.
That's right.
Exactly
Yeah,
right.
that's the point, right? Yeah.
Awesome. All right, Sheree, a spotlight for you. What are you up to if people want to learn more about you or check out OSU theater stuff? Sorry, the OSU. I
Right.
apologize.
Yes. Yeah. Go to theater.osu.edu is our website. You can find out what productions we're doing and, who's involved. So that's kind of where my presence is.
Cool.
Or, come see a show.
Oh, you're on IMDb though, right? You've got to be.
I am on IMDb. I'm not on the professional. So if
Okay.
they go to IMDb, they will see like every single credit for every episode.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Oh, Sheree, thank you so much. This has been an absolute delight and so good to see you again and have it. We didn't get a chance to really just to jam because we were so busy with the show, but this has been great. Thank you
It
so
has.
much.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
You've been listening to the Page&Stage Podcast. All my thanks to this week's guest and to all of you out there for listening. If you enjoyed or found value in this podcast, please tell at least one other person. Word of mouth has always been and will always be the best marketing tool in the world. You can learn more about all my guests and access their websites and projects in the show notes. And hey, feel free to send me your thoughts, your comments, your questions at jason@pageandstage.art. I always love to hear from you, and I might just even feature your questions on future episodes. This podcast is built with Alitu, the all-in-one podcasting app created by the amazing team over at thepodcasthost.com. Thank you again for listening. And until next time, I'm Jason Cannon, and I cannot wait to hear your story.